All right. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to see you. Yeah, thank you for joining our webinar. A quick introduction from my side. My name is Finn. I am one of the co-founders of Mapular and also the CPTO. That means I'm covering all the product and technology decisions. And I have with me here today Sarah. Sarah is our head of growth, and she will be taking into account all your questions. So if you have a question, please just shoot them into the chat and we are more than happy to answer them. And other than that, I will wait another 1-2 minutes for the remaining attendees to join, and then we can kick it off. And yeah, in the meantime, I'll maybe use the time to introduce myself a bit further. My background is in geography and geoinformatics. That means I'm really coming from the technical world. I used to apply geoinformatics and GIS approaches to urban planning and site selection. And now I'm more in the world of data analytics and software engineering. And as part of Mapular, we're building a site selection platform for expansion. And we also offer services. And we thought we're going to give you a best practice overview of all the use cases that we have with customers and that we see currently happening in the industry, and share that knowledge with you and not just keep it to us. And yeah, this is what I'm going to do now. And I'm going to switch to the presentation now. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. So what is today about? Today is about site selection best practices for franchise growth. And why did we do this topic is because we're constantly talking with franchise owners and franchise brands in Germany and Europe, but also the US. And there's one thing that we always see, and it's a workflow that is missing. How do you assess a site end to end? So what do you get today? Today you will get an overview about a practical playbook that you can apply to your franchise, to your brand, and we'll also show you how it can be done. But first of all, I want to encourage you to really use our knowledge and ask questions, drop questions into the chat as we go. Sarah is collecting them, and we will come back to them at a later point. So, all right. So today is about a 4-step system to standardize your decisions in site selection. Because what we see is the biggest risk in all our projects is that our customers are treating expansion the way they used to 5 years ago or 4 years ago. So they're not adapting the workflow that they're applying to evaluating and finding sites. So why do we think this is important? Because dynamics from region to region shift, audiences change or move, and most importantly, what the best market was 5 years ago is not the best market today. So what do we want to give you? A playbook that you can use to stop debating opinions. I think this site is better than that site. And to actually move to a repeatable playbook that you can apply to then give insight to your management or to the headquarter, to your partners, to brokers, so that everyone is aware of what is actually a good site for our brand or for our company. But also internally, what could be the outcome is that you prevent self-competition. So something maybe called cannibalization, and you can change or you can adapt to change quite quickly. I'm going to start this off with a nice quote. There is absolutely no second chance to get the real estate right. Why do I bring up this quote? Because site selection deserves process and discipline, and a process discipline, because unlike marketing, or if you're creating a menu or pricing or adding people to your team, real estate mistakes can stay with you, or they will stay with you for years. So today is really about best practices, standards, and a workflow. It's not about fancy dashboards, but it's something that you can use and apply. So to start this off, I would like to get to know you a bit and just understand what is your biggest site selection pain right now. And I'm just looking at Sarah. We should be able to bring up the poll in the app here now so that you can actually answer this question interactively in the tool. So let's try it out. So yes, there are 6 options. You should be able to select the options and we should be able to see the results coming in. So maybe take a second and answered them. The first question is the first answer is a bit cut off. It means find spaces faster and compare with existing locations. And then the last one is overlap, surprises, cannibalization, and internal competition. So I don't see results coming in that can mean that the tool is not working as expected. But then let's maybe take a look at the chat. Are there any changes coming in from the chat? No. Maybe someone wants to share some knowledge from their brand with us. I don't see any responses coming in. Otherwise, I'll skip this. Unfortunate enough, then we'll not get to know your brand. Then it's not working. Thank you, Alexandra, for the feedback. Then maybe just put the numbers in the chat. Then I can get back to them later. But thank you for the feedback. Then let me go to the next point. All right. So what do we want to show you today, or what do we want to give you today? It's a playbook with that you can answer the 4 most important questions. And you see those 4 questions here. And we're going to answer them in order, fast, and practical so that you can actually use them. So the first question is, what is a good location, or what does a good location mean for our format? What inputs do we trust, and how do we make them comparable? That's the second topic. And then the third topic is quite important. If you have multiple locations, where can we grow without hurting existing units or existing locations? And the fourth one is, how do we run decisions at scale, no matter what or who sources the site? So if you have multiple team members doing expansion planning, how can you ensure everyone is applying the same logic? And I'm going to go through them one by one, and we will also capture the questions that come up through the way. So this is a quote that I translated from German into English. This is from David Baumgartner from Dean and David. And what he said, translated, is if the 3 factors, concept, real estate, operator, match, then success is inevitable. So what does that mean? If one factor is weak, even a good location can fail, or a good operator cannot save a bad site. So it basically means that these components, these factors need to work hand in hand. And what we'll show you with those 4 questions is how can you operationalize that logic to find a way that these 3 factors work together. And for that, I want to bring up an example. For question 1, what is a good location for our format? The first question is, what is our format? So I've brought a quick example for a QSR, or a quick service restaurant profile, so fast food, for example. And in that sense, we have 3 main components that we see throughout all our customer projects. It's catchment beats postcode, clusters can be good, and logistics and access are non-negotiable. So what does that mean? Customers live in a kind of a travel time, so in a certain distance from a location. They don't live within a certain postcode and it stops at some point and then there's no people living there anymore. So you should really focus on how many people do I reach in a certain driving time and not just a distance. Then the second, food decisions, especially with food, happen where food options concentrate. So what does that mean? For example, shopping malls. In malls, being outside the food cluster or the food court can actually kill conversion, because people go there with the mindset they want to buy food, they're now ready to purchase or consume that product. And the third part is deliveries, access, parking, even rider flow can make or break a throughput for a QSR profile. I've brought another example, and that's fitness. Fitness is a special example because it has or we often see 2 types. One is micro gyms, for example, Circle Fit, and they often come with a small footprint sweet spot, lower rent, and then also a faster setup. And interestingly, they often prefer B locations, so near the pedestrian zone, but not inside of it, because the rent is often lower, so they can access these trade-offs. So what does that mean? The key idea behind this is you have a low investment risk or a lower investment risk, and you have a real exit option if the site is actually not the right site. So the good location profile must really match the operating model that your franchise or your brand, if it's not a franchise, works in. And the other type for fitness is, because fitness is not one format, is a multi-format network, for example, Easy Fitness. And multi-format networks, they win by matching format to the market and the available boxes in that market. So for example, a personal-less format can work in smaller towns because the operations are simpler. Then an EMS studio or these units can work in very dense areas with different demand patterns. Premium and discount formats, they serve different formats or different segments and also different price sensitivity. So you need to look for a different location based on that format. So the takeaway here really is site selection is not only choosing a place, it's really choosing the right format for that place. So yeah, just to highlight that. We're going to the second question, and what I want to highlight here is, what is a site packet? A site packet keeps owners organized with the ins and outs of each location. This is a quote from an English-speaking podcast. And what is this all about? A site packet is a franchisor tool. It's not a broker deliverable. And what does it do? It keeps your evaluation within the company organized and, more importantly, comparable across locations and people. So that when you scale decisions, or when you can scale decisions, everyone in the team uses the same checklist and the same input back and forth, or the same input pack. And what does that look like? And what do we want you to do? So question 2 is make locations comparable with a territory pack. So define a territory pack, or how do we define it, is basically it's a consistent snapshot of a site surrounding reality. What happens in the neighborhood of a location? Because it matters when you look at different regions or different areas and you don't have the comparability. It breaks. So it breaks when you're looking across a boundary from an administrative region. So what we want you to do is you need to come up with kind of a pattern that you can apply over and over again. For example, a boundary logic. What is your boundary? Have a fixed rule, for example, 10-minute travel time. What are POI stands for points of interest? What are your competitors? What are your anchor stores that you want to be next to? Use it as a logic, have it as a default. Then what is your context? What is the population you're trying to targeting? What is the age bands that are important for you? What is the purchasing power that a typical consumer or customer has? Where do you find that? Use that over and over if you assess 5, 10, 15 sites. And then the last one, site visit checklist. Why do we think those are important? Because go prepared to visiting a site so that you prevent vibe checks or more personal favors from day to day, and also overconfidence, so that you can actually make sure this is a repeated process, it works. To finalize this slide, this is an external view. This is looking at a site, this is looking at external data, but something that we want to highlight for you is adding your internal signals. And I brought another quote, this goes through the whole presentation, is you have to be in the heads. You are not reminded 2 to 3 times a day that you want a waffle. This is from the franchise Wonder Waffle, and it's hinting at an important topic. And it's the clash of pull versus push. This is something very common in marketing, but it's also common in geography. What does it mean? Pull means people or your potential customers want your product. They want it and they show intent. Push means you are present in those areas where pull is the strongest. So you're pushing your product to the people. So how can you translate where pull works and where you should place push? By doing location intelligence and by doing site selection. And why is this important? Because every modern franchise brand or every brand in general that has an online presence has these internal, what we call first-party signals. So you have 3 types of layers. You have demand signals, you have attention signals, and you have intent. This varies from the format that you're doing, but orders, reservations that someone does online for your restaurant, delivery areas that you deliver to, membership signups from specific areas, all those show demand. Where do people want your product or your brand? Then attention means, and this is very likely that everyone is doing this, is where do your campaigns or where does your online marketing campaign work? So analyze where Google Ads works and where Meta works. really understand how is my brand working online, and then combine that with simple tools like a store finder, store locator. If you have 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 locations, you likely have a store finder, a store locator on your website for your customers to find the nearest location. Track that, understand how are people using this, what store are they looking at. The same for newsletter clicks. Where are people opening our newsletter? So use like a CRM like Klaviyo to understand the online demand as well. So the key message here to wrap this up is you do not need perfect data, but you need consistent and explainable signals. And once the pull is visible, you can put the push in the right places. And the next question is then, how do you grow without hurting your existing units? So we're going to question 3, what you should decide upfront, because Q3 is all about preventing self-competition and avoiding expansion chaos. So you should decide upfront, what is my overlap tolerance? So if I have multiple locations, how high can the overlap between these be? So you want to stay consistent in doing that. Then you want to spot white space or white spot early on, so that you know, okay, I want to position site 3 there because I have 1, 2 there, and pull is coming from there. Then you really want to plan, or you want to separate planned density from accidental overlaps. So you need to separate, is this a density that we've planned and we want to take into account that we have multiple locations covering somewhat the same areas, or is it accidental and didn't happen on target? And then the last one that I want to really bring up here is, if you buy territory or new locations without a plan, it's not going to work when scaling. When you do this over and over again, it's going to become a liability. And I've brought another interesting quote for this: don't just buy extra territory just to buy it. So territory is not an asset if you cannot develop it with quality and also speed. So really use this, understand it, not just to treat your ambitions, but also to prove that your workflow is working. The third question, continuing the third question, we have 2 rules, and I want to bring the examples up from earlier that we see with our customers. And one is a rule for overlap for QSRs, so for quick service restaurants, and the other one is for fitness. And why do we show you this? Because for us as a geoinformatics or GIS expert or site selection expert, it's simple to say, okay, build an overlap rule, but what does that actually mean? So how can you use that in your day-to-day work? So what can it look like for a QSR location? What does sales overlap mean? So you want to understand, where is potential sales, where is my addressable market overlapping, and do I want that or not? So ask yourself when you're doing your analysis, if catchments overlap beyond a certain percentage, I need to review if that site is actually a potential site. If your delivery zones overlap beyond a certain percentage, then either you have a demand that is a foundation for this, you have so many people ordering that you need to cover this with multiple locations, or review it, is that actually the case? And the second example is capacity overlap. This goes a bit from a different angle, because sometimes the second site doesn't mean you're cannibalizing your existing site, but it can actually mean I'm helping my existing site to function better. So it's a demand relief. So for example, a trigger can be that there's a consistent waiting in your gym, there's a member threshold that has been met, and you really want to just ensure that the existing members of that location can use the service in the quality that you want to. And then opening up a second location close to that makes a lot of sense. All right, another quote: time kills all deals. So this is really setting the reality of commercial real estate. Speed matters. Deals move, a landlord can decide, and then waiting can cost you the entire site. So this is why you need fast pre-checks, and you also need to run this in parallel when doing due diligence, and you don't want to slow down committee cycles. So what do we want to give you for this? We want to give you a checklist that you can use and directly apply when you're looking at the next sites. All right, so this is kind of a take-home checklist for you that you can take into your workflow, apply it, adapt it, and use it. And the first point here is the intake. So whatever comes in from your data, standardize it and put it into the packet so that everyone is using the same standardized packet, the same standardized way of looking at that location. The second is the pre-check. How are you doing the pre-check? Is everyone using the same kill criteria? Is the catchment the same that you're analyzing? Is the overlap threshold the same? Does this site pass our non-negotiables, and are those non-negotiables safe? The third one, create a scorecard. What do you need to create a scorecard? You need your territory pack and you need your first-party signals. And then you have a scorecard. If you combine them, you can properly analyze and review a location in a similar way that everyone else does it. The fourth one is then just decision. You either approve, reject, or dig deeper into a site. But what you now have is you have a documented reason. You can say, or you can negotiate, I need to dig deeper, or we need to reject because of. It's not just gut feeling, but you actually have the data to support this. And the last one is feedback, especially when you're scaling, or when you're scaling from the first tens location to hundreds. Compare your expected with the real output, and then adjust your workflow, adjust the playbook. So what I really want to emphasize here is that documentation creates transparency, not only for your management, but also for your partners. So the more you document, the more transparent your workflow becomes, and that you can apply it later on. So what I want to do now is use the last, let's call it 4 or 5 minutes to bring you an example. So I'm bringing up the example of a fitness studio. In this case, it's a real-world example of an EMS micro studio site selection. So what is our target profile here? We have, I call them time-poor urban professionals. Someone else might call them yuppies. So they're maybe 30 to 45, 50. Taking the age group 30 to 49, they are above average purchasing power. What we want to do is we want to use the same catchment definition for both areas that we're looking at so that we can compare them. We want to look at competitors, where are they in here? And then we want to create a decision output. So how can we continue working with this? And I'm gonna actually switch now and show you how I would do this and set it up. But we will also share with you afterwards the slides where this is in a checklist that you can actually use this as well and go back to using this. All right, let me share my screen. Do you see my screen? Sarah, do you see my screen? Perfect. Yeah, all right. Okay, perfect. So what do we need? Let me bring up my notes. Okay, so what am I looking at? Currently, I'm looking at Berlin. I'm looking at our platform. This is a site selection application, or expansion workspace, as we call it. And I'm going to look at Germany, actually. And I'm going to bring up some data. I'm going to pull in total population. I'm going to pull in purchasing power. I'm going to pull in, or I'm going to actually start filtering now. I'm going to set the purchasing power to higher than 28,000 because I want to have somewhat above the average. Depends what source you're using, but the average purchasing power is around 28,000 euros per capita. So I'm setting it to 28,000 here. And now I want to look at my target group, my actual age groups. So as I said, I'm gonna look at, let's look at 30 to 44, and then let's look at 45 to 59 is pushing it a bit, but I'm gonna take it into account, and then I'm gonna combine that into a target group total, and then I'm gonna actually use this together. So age plus age, and now we need 45 to 59. And so this will calculate this together. And then I will actually now, because we have to kind of use this in a proper way, I'm going to take the amount per 1,000 people, because if an area is less dense populated, then I cannot compare it in that sense. So now I'm going to make it comparable. I'm going to use an index in that sense. So people per 1,000 is what I'm going to use. And now let's take a look at the map. Let's explore this a bit. So first of all, let's maybe take a look at the purchasing power. Let's colorize this a bit better. I want to understand the purchasing power, and the purchasing power is now a bit higher. You see the darker, it gets darker in these cells. We're at the higher end, and I'm gonna now look as well again at the total population, just to see where higher populated areas are. Okay, we're seeing now the opposite. So we have Munich, Frankfurt, these more metropolitan areas. We have Hamburg, parts of Berlin that meet our criteria. So now what I want to do is I want to analyze the location. So let's maybe go to Munich. This is now loading the data. Again, I'm changing the zoom level. And while this is loading, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually take a look at the competitors. So I'm going to load in fitness centers, and I'm going to load in points of interest that are relevant for my competitor analysis. So let's take a look. This has loaded, and I'm going to add points of interest. I am, in this case, looking at recreation and then fitness, sports and fitness. So this is now going to load all those points. This is probably going to be a lot, yes, as expected. So I'm going to turn off this layer for now. I don't need to see it in the map. And what I now want to do is I actually want to look at the catchment. This is what I told you, right? We want to understand a driving time around this location. So I want to understand how many people actually live within 10 minutes from a certain location. And if I look at this, I can see here, right, how many competitors there are in. Then I can see actually this area looks quite nice. It has a high purchasing power, or we can look also here. It has a high purchasing power here, 44,000 euros per capita. There's only 7 competitors in that area. We have about 400 people out of 1,000 that are part of our target group that we set up. So now let's calculate how many people do we actually reach in total with 10-minute driving time. So I'm going to hit this button and I'm going to run this analysis, and I'm going to see, okay, within 10 minutes of driving, this is a bit outside of Munich, I'm reaching 20,000 people. So now I could take a look at another site. Let's maybe take the site more in the center of it. Let's go back and let's run it for this. Then this will show me a few more people. And this is what I mean. What you now have here is a workflow that you can apply. Now I see, okay, here I'm reaching 217,000 people that you can apply over and over. You can go to every other area in this map, you can analyze it, and you can then simply export the data as an Excel and share it with your management. And this is what you should then be using to create a one-pager. And you can actually argue, hey, this site, there's only 7 competitors, or there's 25 in that area. So this is what I wanted to highlight. How can you use data, in this case, third party, not first party, to analyze sites and to really use a workflow, a 4-question-based workflow, to apply this over and over again. So coming back to the last minute of the presentation, I'm going to just quickly wrap up this and share my screen again. You should be seeing the QA slide in a second. I want to come back and answer your last questions that you might have after showing you this and to wrap up this webinar. Sarah, are there questions in the chat that I should answer?
Yeah, not so far, but now is the time if you want to ask anything.
Yeah, how would I take anchor stores into account here? What I would do is I would first try to understand what are my anchor stores and then search for them. So what I just did is I added all fitness studios in that area, but in theory that doesn't work. So I would actually take a look at what are the anchor stores. For example, if you're in retail fashion, you maybe want to have a Zara that is nearby. So you have those big pulling stores. So I would look in our database or in a database just for Zara stores and then see where they are. And then maybe even run a catchment or an analysis on how many Zara stores are within a certain distance. So yeah, this is how I would use anchor stores. All right. I don't see another question in the chat. Then I would go to the last slide. The last slide is just finalizing this webinar right on time. So the takeaways from the session. What I would like you to take away from the session is that you should really build up your expansion process as part of a playbook. So really build out a workflow that you standardize, that you can adapt, it doesn't have to be fixed, that you can apply over and over again. So what we'll do is we'll share the presentation, but also the recording. But in the presentation, there's an appendix where we also have some template scorecards that you could use for the examples of QSR and fitness, just to give you an idea how we would do that. Obviously, this is not as detailed if we would do a project. So if you want to see how we could do this, we have a small offer for you. If you scan the QR code, we're happy to do an analysis for free. We're also happy to consult you for free. So if you scan the QR code and use that form, then maybe share some infos. What are you currently looking at? What address? And then we are happy to run that and take you through it. All right, there was another question. There was 2 more questions in the chat. One is, which countries does the tool cover? We're mostly focusing on Germany and the US, but we have about 9 more countries in Europe. I think it's the German neighbor countries plus a bit more on the southwest that we cover. But we do not cover the full European continent yet, but it's the US and Germany that is fully covered, then another 9 countries in Europe. Then perhaps what about cannibalization? Does the catchment take that into account? The normal catchment that I showed you, not, but there's an additional step that we would then calculate. So based on the catchment, we would kind of first analyze the network and network gaps and network overlaps. And these overlaps, based on the overlap rule, would then become the cannibalization test to see what stores of my network are cannibalizing each other, or maybe not. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't see another question in the chat. Then maybe coming back just to those points. I see 6, 6, 3, and 6. So everyone that answered in the chat, the first question is, locations are difficult to compare, and overlap surprises, cannibalization, and internal competition. Very interesting. So what this seems to me is, it's not actually a data issue. It seems to be being more of a workflow issue. So you need to find a workflow that actually enables you to compare sites, and that actually enables you to analyze overlap. So yeah, thank you for joining. Thanks everyone for the meeting, and then or for the webinar. Then reach out to us if you have any question. We're happy to help you, happy to support you if you need. Otherwise, follow us on LinkedIn if you want to see more webinars. But that's it. Have a good afternoon and greetings from Berlin.